All right, great discussion with Christopher Mims from the Wall Street Journal, and he said a few things that I think perfectly fit into our next panel. He was talking about predictive analytics being the way of the future, the way that people are scaling up, getting that visibility that we really need in unpredictable times, I think. So that's why we brought you this panel today to speak to some of those things, to not only the predictive analytics side, but also the way of securing that information that's out in the cloud, because I think that's equally important. And so that's really something we want to emphasize throughout the day. Like, we want that visibility, but we want that security as well with everything we do. So that brings us to our keynote panel, Building Scalability into Cloud-Based Advanced Industrial Analytics. And I want to welcome Kemell Kassim from GrayMatter, Johnston from U.S. Steel, and Laura Harshberger from PPG, and they're going to be our panelists today. So I'm going to let each one of you just give a quick introduction so that people can get to know you a little bit, and then we'll get into our questions and discussion. Kemell, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
So my name's Kemell Kassim. I've been with GrayMatter about 22 years now, and it's just a really exciting time for us, going from being able to visualize things for people to actually being able to help predict things for people.
Absolutely. John?
Hi everyone, Johnston, U.S. Steel. I've been with U.S. Steel just over a year now. I've been in IT for many years, since the 80s, in security since 2000, working with a lot of manufacturing companies to help converge the IT/OT worlds together and secure the manufacturing side of the house.
Right. Laura?
Laura Harshberger. I'm a senior IT manager at PPG, and I work on the application side with our operations business team. So managing manufacturing, supply chain, asset management, quality systems.
Absolutely. And we have PPG to thank for the pavilion that we're in today here at the Carnegie Science Center. So shout out to PPG for sure. Kemell, I wanted to start with you. I mean, you've been in a lot of manufacturing facilities, your time at GrayMatter. Just what are some of the ways that you're seeing manufacturers move to the cloud, trying to make predictions, and the types of predictions that they want to make?
For us, what we see most often is quality. Mm-hmm. So in food and beverage, that's being able to predict moisture, density, pH, protein content. And then in chemicals, that's viscosity, particle size. And the big thing that people want to do is not just be able to predict it, but you need to be able to predict it and then be able to get it to somebody that can affect the process and get you back on spec with just the minimal reduction or minimal scrap that you may have. And then we also see wages where people want to treat water, air, gas, electric, and steam as an ingredient and understand what does it cost, why do some products cost more to make than others, and then believe it or not, good old OEE, being able to reduce downtime, which is very important these days. If you can make things, you can probably sell them.
Right.
And can we make it faster and again maintaining the quality.
If you make things, you can probably sell them. I like that a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. Laura, can you give us a little bit of an introduction to how your team at PPG scaled up the visibility of operations data and linked that to business level objectives?
Yeah, so for those of you that know PPG, we've grown a lot through acquisition, so inorganic growth, which leads to very disparate systems. And so several years ago, we embarked on a journey to develop a corporate-wide data lake. And so we have over 100 data sources now in the data lake. A lot of it's unconformed, so we're working with different business units to conform that data, for manufacturing models or supply chain models, quality, and there's still going to be a bit of a journey there. But that's how we plan to tie to the corporate-wide KPIs. So the idea is to get all of the data, conform it, and then be able to report centrally, which is difficult for a company with 9, 10 different business units and continuing to grow. So.
Yeah, absolutely. A conversation that we have a lot at GrayMatter with clients is just how to build that internal case and to talk about that ROI and to tell leaders about it. Kemell, what are some of the ways that when you're talking to customers and they're asking for help with that you give them advice on?
The ROI specifically?
Yeah, ROI.
So usually if you have the data, we can get 2 to 3 weeks. We can start providing some insight in that data, and then 6 to 8 weeks, we can start operationalizing that data, which means getting it in front of somebody that can actually affect it.
Right.
And usually within the first 3 months, you will be able to pay for that initial engagement. And then it sounds like a lot, but we're actually been able to, our target is 10x on the yearly subscription that we're providing ROI on.
And those are the kind of things that leaders need to know, before they decide to go forward with a project. Is like, what's the time horizon? What's the ROI going to be? And to feel confident about saying it. So that's just something that I think is worth coming back to all the time, because you need to build a strong case if you want to have a successful analytics project from the start. So I think something, and I mentioned this in the beginning, that everybody's thinking about when it comes to cloud is security. So John, I want to talk to you about that because that's what you do. So, what's your approach, or what's your advice to balancing the benefits of leveraging, cloud-based technologies and securing sensitive data in operations, which, of course, everybody, given the headlines, is thinking about every single day?
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Getting data to the cloud is easy. Securing it is a challenge, right? And so that's for a company that 100 years old. They're a little conservative, so moving that sensitive data outside the walls is a little scary for folks. I think we're making headway there to kind of understand that better, communicate that, educate folks on how to do that securely. There's technologies out there, processes to do that. Follow a good standard best practice framework. You can secure that data out there and kind of reduce your on-prem expenses as well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll keep coming back to that theme of security throughout the day, because we all think about it all the time. So this next question is something that I'd like each panelist to offer an answer on. So being able to visualize data at scale, that's the major theme today, like Jim said at the beginning. So we'll keep coming back to it. But what's each of your perspectives on why that's such an important objective? Kemell, do you want to start?
Yeah, so early on when we were able to, us and the whole industries were able to start providing predictions. A lot of those predictions were found, in a back room, and you found the prediction, but then you couldn't affect the process. So being able to visualize it, as close to the process as possible. So ideally, even embedding it in this SCADA system, so what the operator is looking at, they see the insight and can affect it. So that's, if you can't visualize it, I struggle to how you would do something about it.
Right. Yeah. And to your point too about the operator, the mobile solutions, having it in the field. Can you talk about that and how customers are doing that, or if that's a highly desirable thing? But I think we all assume that like operators in every industry are walking around with tablets that are instantly being updated all the time. But that's not always the case, right? Unfortunately.
No, very often it's not. Very often it's not. No, we've seen some, but it's not to the level that it could be. And the challenges you run into are, security, Wi-Fi availability in the plant. Some of these are big, thick, heavy buildings with lots of concrete, and it makes it difficult. So really, it's a unique thing that as a manufacturer, you need to take a look at your unique situation, decide for yourself: is it better to put a ton of infrastructure in Wi-Fi? Do you just have some local panels that people can use close to where they can make changes?
Yeah, for sure. So John, same question. I mean, what from your perspective is the importance of having that grand visibility throughout a huge organization like yours?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's so from an IT perspective, IT security, we've had visibility into data for years, right? Taking a look at threats, vulnerabilities, activity on our networks. Getting that visibility down into the process control area and the OT side has been a game changer. So for the folks who are on the plant floor, seeing machines talking to each other that shouldn't be talking to each other brings up a whole conversation around why those things are doing that kind of conversation back and forth. So giving the OT process control operators some visibility into that has helped kind of shift them to understanding security a little better, feeling a little more comfortable with it, and why we need to wrap some security around those. With the threats, ransomware, some of the attacks that we've seen on, pipelines, water industry. So From a steel industry perspective, if we get something shut down, we have liquid steel that's going to harden up pretty quick.
Yep.
So we gotta make sure we stay on top of that. So I think the visibility into the OT world has been a game changer over the past few years.
Yeah, and when I hear game changer, I have to ask a follow-up question. Just, how has that changed the game? How does that, having that visibility, from maybe a time when you didn't to now, like what does it let you do, or why is it so impactful?
Well, I think from the process side, from what I understand for these folks, is there are machines talking to each other that shouldn't be. So that creates traffic, that creates delays, and some of these transactions are nanosecond and have to move quickly. So if you can eliminate some of that noise and those miscommunications, that helps open up the network for speedier conversations, things moving quicker. Correct processing, some of the errors I used to get, they can eliminate by getting rid of the conversation, those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it becomes a mover for operational efficiency just by having that. So
more efficient.
Yeah, Laura, same question. Just kind of thematically, why is that so important?
Yeah, well, we have over 150 plants, so doing predictive analytics at one plant is great. Doing a pilot's great, but we have to figure out how to scale so that we can really take advantage of the cost savings, the efficiency, and what the product could truly give us, or whether it's software product or data.
Right, absolutely. So Kemell, we talked a little bit about this earlier, in terms of ROI, but just kind of take us through, how to set expectations when it comes to analytics. For a crew, internally, if they're looking at a project, maybe even a specific example like a wages or a product quality, whatever kind of helps to make the point.
Sure. One of the things that you see as you get into the expectations are you have to find a problem that is really important to the business, and if you don't have that first, then you're doing things as a science project. You can play around a little bit, you can invest some time, but it's really not going to return any investment to the company. So you want to have a problem that's really important. And then another thing, the data is extremely important to the historical data, but the caution there would be don't chase a problem that has brand new equipment because the data is really good there, and you ignore something that has could use some data sensors added to it, and then that's where your real problem is at. Right. So that's one of the biggest things is, do you have a real problem? Do you know how much it costs you if you don't do anything about it? And making sure that everybody's on board with solving this problem, that the company has agreed this is a problem we're solving, because otherwise you're just going to get caught in some silos and you'll spend a lot of time and you probably won't see the return on the investment. So I think that's really key, is a problem that the whole company's behind to solve.
Sure. And I'm going to ask Laura this too, but how do you know, how does a company know, or an operator that's leading a project know, Kemell, I'll ask you this first, and then Laura, if they have the data that they need to do a predictive project, or to actually analyze that and to make a difference? Is there a way that you can do a gut check or kind of analyze that, as sort of a step one at that sensorization level or whatever it is?
Sure. For us, when we're talking to somebody about it, the big thing would be, do you have historical data? How high res is that data? Yep. And so that's a quick yes or no. If the answer is yes, we ingest that data into the analytics package and then let it tell us. Don't try to go through and pick, I think this is important, I think this is important. That's the part of the machine learning, is let the machine figure out these 7 are really what's affecting your process, and then concentrate on those, and then that's the data you put up into the cloud, so you don't have a ton of stuff going up there that doesn't need to be going up there.
That's the algorithm, that's the AI kind of making some of those assessments.
And it'll tell you these are the 7 things that greatly affect the process the most. We'll be able to give you percentages of time. This was the issue, this was the issue, and we'll narrow it down. Right. If you don't have the data, that's when we have to do things a bit the old-fashioned way, and then you're going to need to decide based on your budget how much, where do you put the sensors, and that's where you still have to do it the old-fashioned way a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Do some thinking on our own.
But if a company has something like Historian, for example,
yeah,
that's where that data is residing, and they have, potentially years, if not decades, of data from which to start to put together that puzzle, right?
Yeah, we have put years of data into the cloud for the analytics to go through, and if you can do that, you're off to a quick start usually.
Yeah, and you mentioned data resolution, which was a new term to me when I first learned it. I'd just like to talk to the audience about that too. So, what does that mean? And like, I know we have some really interesting examples of the spectrum of data resolution that a particular manufacturer or what have you might be able to actually produce.
So I love third-party stories.
Yes, me too.
This is a negative third-party story. Okay. So I won't mention their name, but a company spent a lot of money putting in big historians. They didn't want to go to the cloud, so they did a lot of stuff on-prem. And then when they did that, where they were getting the data from, they were getting data once a day. One reading a day. They spent millions on this big infrastructure, but where they were getting the data was the weakest link, and it was coming in once a day, and I don't know what you can predict with once a day data. And that was the whole problem. They didn't look at the problem we're trying to solve, and then take a look at the data and realize that once a day will not do it.
Right.
So so the data resolution, the higher the resolution on the data, the more readings that you get, the better you will be able to predict.
Right, so we're talking about so that's an extreme example of once a day. If you're doing that, definitely call us. But you might be, maybe a more typical situation might be like an every 15 minutes or something like that from remote assets, and you might want to get that down to like second or even sub-second resolution.
Well,
right?
really, again, what we try to do is, everybody's a bit unique. Yeah. So it depends on the process that you're chasing. So some process, 15 minutes might work. Some things that folks are working on probably wouldn't do it. So it's really sitting down and understanding the process a bit and deciding what will work and what will not.
Right.
And we've had times where we put the data in and we said it wasn't going to be fast enough, and you just can't get really good predictions with 15-minute data as an example.
Right, but it's easy to, well, not necessarily easy, but it's totally possible to increase that resolution, to increase that speed. So
it's usually infrastructure being able to miss the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have about 10 minutes left with this panel. So I just want to remind everybody that you can ask questions. If you have questions online, we are live here in Pittsburgh, so post them and we'll ask them to the panel. We have a lot of knowledge here on stage today, so take advantage of it and let us know what you're thinking, and I'll be happy to pass this along. So Laura, same question about just that data resolution and how you get it, what you need, and kind of what the expectations should be for somebody who might be watching.
Yeah, so I think one thing we've learned is consistent data acquisition is pretty difficult if you don't have data in your ERP system or if it's not in a MES. So we find a lot of spreadsheets and access databases, and while that might be okay for a single site, it's not okay to start bringing that in. It's not consistent with other sites. And so I think that is a big learning for us, right, as we embark on predictive analytics, is, well, we have to have consistent data, and it has to stream possibly, every second. Yep. To really give us those predictions that can be used as they're, batch manufacturing and going through the quality step. You have to have something that is real time to make decisions. Otherwise, they'll have to go back through their manual testing.
Right, absolutely. And spreadsheets are one thing, but I mean, we find paper, as still being a huge component of what industrial operators are doing, right? I mean, that's still, I think, part of the growth potential for a lot of companies, that, they could be using a paper traveler, or they, might be using a huge number of spreadsheets or something like that. But kind of all of this is pointed in the direction of getting away from all those things, right? Going paperless, getting away from spreadsheets, right? So, but often the conversation starts there, right?
Well, it's really, just like the resolution of your data, that you're getting into the machine learning, is also the resolution of the data you're getting into your own brain. So, if you've got spreadsheets or some charts that are, in a hallway or things like that are updated once a week, again, you saw something, trying to figure out, well, what caused that? How do I make the change? How do I improve the the quality, the uptime? where if you can increase the resolution, to me that's the biggest issue with the paper is the number of people that can see it and increasing the resolution of the new data coming to you, that you can do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So John, I wanted to ask you about remote connectivity, which I'll probably be asking people throughout the day, but through the pandemic, we needed to be able to work remotely, whether it's from home or from a remote location. What are some ways that people in cybersecurity, people in leadership positions that care about cyber and have to explain things to a board of directors when they ask and things like that, should be thinking about just continuing that journey of securing all these thousands more remote connections that we find ourselves with because of the way that work is going on. I know people in manufacturing plants have to be there in person. Other employees, they don't. They can work from home. So how have you, taken on that challenge, and how can others learn from that?
Yeah, sure. So I think we all learned a lot over the past few years. I think prior to that, other companies I've been at have been kind of, not real receptive to working remotely unless it was, necessary. And managers were concerned about how am I going to manage a person when I can't see them or see what they're doing. And I think the technology has really come around the past 5 or 10 years, right? I think 5 or 10 years ago, we would have struggled to deal with some of the remote connectivity we've all had to do today, right? So I think technology coming a long way, management seeing that people can work from home and be productive has been helpful. On the security side, it's obviously making sure that person on the other end is who they say they are, right? So making sure we have strong passwords and multi-factor. We authenticate that person in multiple ways to make sure they are who they are. And then from an employee perspective, that's not so bad. We can do that. It's always the vendors, right? We're not sure. Some vendors we find have a generic account they're using, trying to connect in. That all had to change, so they all had to have individual accounts. So we had some challenges there with getting vendors set up with unique accounts and having them tee up their multi-factor on their phone or however they wanted to do it. So once that's in place, I think we feel pretty confident and comfortable that we've secured those remote connections and allowed people to work remotely and securely.
Right. Yeah. And when you talk about vendors or contractors, my head kind of goes to version control and being able to track, not only the changes are being made, but also who has access. So is that kind of the concept that you're talking about?
I'm talking strictly just getting in, and typically they would have access to certain things. We would restrict them down to only what they should be getting to. Gotcha. Not so much about versioning, more about are you who you say you are, and you're only getting to what you're allowed to get to do your job. So it's more around securing that part.
How monumental an effort is that to try to make sure that you have only access to the things that you need access to? Because we're talking about large-scale organizations, and any large corporation, has to take on that task. So right. That's got to be IT and OT working together, coming together. I mean, that's got to be one of those places where you hear about that convergence actually happening.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so from a production plant floor side, you just want your vendor in to do what they need to do, right? And from the security and IT side, we want to make sure they only get to that machine to work on it. They don't have access to all the machines, right? So we have to work closely with the process folks to say, okay, what are those machines? We identify them, IP addresses, secure it down to just that area. So they can only get to that area where we're paying them to work on and not leak into other areas and cause problems, or if their machine gets hacked or whatever, now somebody's using their machine to get into our network and spreading around. So being able to lease privileges, they call it, giving them access to only what they should be working on. It's a challenge, but last few companies I've worked with, following best practices. It's a matter of just communicating with the folks on the other end who want that vendor to come in and tell us what they need access to, and we'll set that up. Yeah.
Right, yeah, it's definitely a best practice because you need to be doing that so that if, that's like the number one thing is to have those best practices in place, like access control, so that if there is something like, news comes out about an unpatched system, or vulnerability or something, at least you have those basics, those fundamentals, in place, to help protect you. So. Again, just if we have questions from actually the in-person audience and also the virtual audience, go ahead and post them. I know I'm reminding a lot, but it should be on your right-hand side of your screen. You can do that, so make use of the platform while we have our panelists today. So the next question I was going to ask each of you, so what have each of you found to be the most common misperception in your industry? And Kemell, you cover every industry, so you can pick one, about moving data to the cloud and leveraging it to enable advanced industrial analytics. I know I'm thinking of a few things that are misperceptions and that are stopping points, sticking points, but that's what I want to get into in this next discussion, is like what's holding people back, what's a misperception that, from your experience and vantage point, you can help to dispel.
Probably the two biggest that I see are how secure it is. I mean, the advantage you have of how quickly you can get started by putting data in the cloud as opposed to building out the infrastructure on-prem. And then the second would be that it's not your data anymore. So that if you're working with a company,
that's the misperception.
It is that that it's misperception because a lot of in the past there were certain companies that would take your data and then sort of hold it hostage, where it's their data now and then you can't get to it easily. Where if you're working with ourselves or somebody else at that level, then it should always be your data.
Yes.
And that would be, I guess it's not technically a misconception because it does. Some people do
No,
operate that way, but
it
it
is
is
something
something.
worry about.
Yeah, and you shouldn't worry about that. You should definitely work with somebody that you always own your data, and it's your data.
Yeah.
So.
John, your industry is filled with misperceptions. So which one maybe is a pet peeve or bothers you the most?
Yeah, I think it's, just traditionally the workforce has been, they're tactical, or they're working with the machines right there. They want to have everything right there with them. So having something out there in a cloud behind the curtain somewhere is a little scary. So help them understand how to secure that. And how to get to it securely and retrieve it securely. And you have to make a choice on what kind of data you want to put in the cloud, right? There may be some sensitive information, your company's recipes, your product recipes, maybe you want to keep that a little closer to the vest. Other data where it's transactional, vibration data, temperature data, that's important data to run through analytics in the cloud, and having that out there is not as much of a security risk. So working with them to understand what kind of data they want to work with and where that should be, close to the vest or out in the cloud. And traditionally, we're starting to see younger generations getting into the manufacturing world where they're receptive to cloud and AI and all those kind of things, and not necessarily does the server have to be in this closet where I can lock the door and touch it and feel it.
Right.
It can be out there a little further and work with it.
I can only assume that the recipe to Coke is like written on parchment, locked in a lead safe, surrounded by a Faraday cage, and that might qualify as air gapped, which we haven't mentioned yet today, but I'm sure we will in later discussions. But that would be an example of keeping one close to the vest.
Keep it close.
So, yeah.
Lock and key.
Yep. So Laura, common misperception, something that bugs you.
Yeah, so everybody said security. I
Yeah.
think that's the one thing. And then the other, I would say, is speed. So sometimes when you have a server right next to you or in your location, it's faster than in the cloud. But really what that means is you need to assess your networks differently and potentially add more bandwidth. And, so you got to look at it from a different perspective.
And like even putting some of those resources at the edge of your network to try to
Right.
speed that access. Yeah, absolutely. So I asked, and you supplied some great questions from our virtual audience. So I'm gonna offer these up, and I think there's some good questions here. So Jason is asking, what are some of the examples of predictive analysis or analytics that you see most commonly used? Kemell, and then maybe Laura, if you have a good example.
I would say, again, back to quality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, quality. So the big thing there is being able to predict, in line while the process is going, to be able to predict that, because a lot of the testing, it's not standardized. So, working with a pet food manufacturer, they have a big bin of food, and where did I take the sample from? How long ago was that? If it's 45 minutes, an hour difference, I make an adjustment, is that where it should be at?
Right.
So I think that's the biggest one, is being able to predict that in line and make the changes.
Right.
It's see that the most.
Yeah, and quality can take on different forms too. It could even be, that startup quality.
Thanks for reminding me.
I was thinking about it, so I wanted to.
No, and that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Once you make the predictions and once there's a lot of confidence that the AI is making the correct predictions, the next is, this is the tough part, is that tribal knowledge that the operators believe that this book has the correct startup procedures. And so far it is 100% that they have been wrong. So we asked them to track, there was some pushback, we asked them to track whenever they deviate from what the machine tells them to do, and it's 100% that they have been mistaken. And it's 100% they thought they were doing the right thing.
Right.
And so giving those startup procedures so you can, instead of taking 30 minutes to get on spec, and all that product that you made, whether you can reblend it or it's complete, it's scrap, if you can reduce that to 15 minutes, you just reduced, half the product that you wasted between every product change.
Yeah.
And that's big. And then the other one is with COVID, the person who does have that tribal knowledge, well, they might not be there today.
Right.
So that was another thing of now you want to make sure that anybody can run the line. You don't have to have the expert there all the time.
Yeah, and these are solutions to problems that, we've been trying to solve in plants for a long time. And we're talking about scrap and downtime and other things. These aren't crazy new solutions. I mean, they're new solutions, but they're not new problems necessarily. They're new ways of getting into those. So Laura, what's an example that really comes to your mind?
Yeah, batch quality is very similar. We're working through that. Another one I'd say inventory optimization. So what should we stock? What should we make to order? How long should we keep material? We're working to try to figure that out. What's our customer demand?
Yeah.
Right? How can we match it? So that's a big one. And then customer life cycle. I mean, we've been doing a lot on the customer. So when might a customer leave us, or at what part of the life cycle are they in?
So you're really baking in some very detailed information about a customer's desires or behaviors into that process. That's interesting. I think this next one would be for John. So Steve is asking, how do you structure a team for OT cybersecurity? I guess a specific OT team. If a company is fortunate to be able to build one.
Yeah, we have, so traditionally it's been kind of separate environments. So there's, talk about the convergence. We've talked about that for years now. I'm actually seeing it in action now. Our CISO has received approval. Security is the number one risk for our company right now. So we get a lot of attention. That's good and bad, right? So we get a lot of attention, and we get the ability to fill those needs that we have, that we feel we need to bring the security team together from the OT and IT side. So we've actually opened up 4 positions for OT security specialists that we're putting in the plants, who will be the liaison. They'll report directly to the CISO, but also have a dotted line to the plant manager. So they'll sit in on those plant meetings. They'll come from the OT world, so they'll understand how to, be a part of the plant environment. But they'll help the plant understand what we need to do for security, right? They're overwhelmed with, we give them a list of vulnerabilities they need to patch, and they don't know where to start. So we need to help them, and that's what we're doing now. So we're gonna, this person's gonna help communicate what the priorities are, patch these things first. That'll take care of a big part of our problem. Vendor comes in, wants to connect up. They'll be there to help kind of get them connected up securely and not just plug in anywhere. So we're getting our security folks into the plant to work with them and help them do the right thing. And they want to do the right thing, they just need the help. And
Right.
so that's what we're doing. We're reaching out and putting people in the plant now.
So did you create those positions because you know that you want somebody who has that specific knowledge of operational data, of the systems and how they work, having that, people who know that you need to prioritize availability, for a manufacturing system, so you don't have molten steel sitting around, things like that. Is that kind of was that the impetus for it?
Yeah, the real driver was we use scorecards for the plants. Here's how your patching is, and there's a lot of red there, and they want to fix that. They want to make it right, but they need the help. And so we made sure, first of all, that the person we're interviewing, we had a lot of candidates who had IT backgrounds. We were really looking for the OT. We'll bring up the speed on the IT. Most of them have some of that, but they're strong in the OT world. And so we look for that, so they fit in well. They talk the talk. They understand how processes and plants work. And then, how do we make that secure? How do they integrate that security into the program there and work with the plants to do that?
Interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
David from our virtual audience has a question about a topic that we were talking about earlier on data resolution. So he's asking, David's asking, can you have too fast of data, meaning every millisecond? For example, can you be in a situation where it's just bombarding you with information that's not useful? Is that a case that has come by?
Well, to have that type of resolution, you would need to be putting it in something. So normally we're taking the data out of a historian, if you're the historical data. And if you've got it down to the millisecond, again, you could choose how much of that data you need to put up.
Yeah.
And then that way you're not using up a lot of cloud space or a lot of the pipe to get it to the cloud. So if you didn't need that high of resolution, you could always just turn it down. So,
Right, yeah.
So.
And that's kind of one of the first steps in the process that we haven't talked about is, getting that organized, getting that clean to a point, where it's actually usable and is going to be aimed at the objective that you're trying to, get. So that could be part of it, is trying to parse out oh yeah, we're getting millisecond data and it's on all these different tags, but we really don't need all of those, or some of those, and figuring that out. And that's part of what, the different algorithms that you might use.
Yeah, maybe there's a use case there that just haven't ran across yet. But
Yeah.
There's people, if you have stored data that is too frequent, you're taking up more space on your hard drive, and then you're, especially in the cloud and your infrastructure, it's too much data. But usually that gets worked out, and well, you folks have not ran into that problem yet.
Yeah,
but,
Laura, have you run into too much data yet?
Not yet. I hope to have that problem someday.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's what we're sort of aiming for, I guess, but yeah, that would be a good problem to have, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I think it's been a great discussion, and I'm really happy we got some questions from the audience. Those are excellent questions, and I want to thank each one of you for joining us on the panel today on a now sunny Pittsburgh afternoon. Hope everybody can see the skyline back there. But Laura, John, and Kemell, thanks for joining us. And I'll just give a quick tease to our next panel. Definitely stay tuned. It's just coming up in a few seconds here. It's going to be finding resources to map value and scale digital transformation. And I'm going to be turning things over to my colleague, Nate Smith with GrayMatter. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you.